Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Just answering the questions in the chat. This was the song from our Verse to Music session by Nick Demaris, and actually artwork and video was made by our own Alicia, who's also part of our team. And I will send the link right now. Yeah. It is very nice to see you, and it's very nice to welcome you on this tutorial session. Today we have a very interesting behind the scenes sort of tutorial with two our in-house translators, Christian Bernert and Shey Rigel, and we're gonna talk about the Madhyamaka again. My apologies that we're not offering any live interpretation for this session, but we'll definitely try to add the subtitles to the recording of this video that's going to be published on the Khyentse Vision Project YouTube channel. And today we are going very deep into an adornment for the ear to delight those of sharp intelligence. It's a collection of the philosophical notes by Jamyang and Wangpo. So with this, let me hand over to Christian and Shey. Welcome. We are very, very happy to see you guys teaching and at least explaining something to us today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ina, for the introduction. Hi, Shey.
Hello, Christian. A pleasure.
Hello. Hello to everyone. So I don't think we need to do much introductory explanations here. Our game plan for this session was to give a little bit of context. So I don't know if the participants here were able to join the session with Elizabeth Mattis Namgyal last week. She used this text that was translated by Shey as a basis. So what we're going to do, I think we're going to try to stick a little bit closer to the text, and for my part of that tutorial, I'm also going to look a little bit at, because as you will see, this is something that Shey will explain. It is a little bit of an unusual text for an online study group, because it is a very terse, brief text that covers a lot of ground, and sometimes in great detail, but great technical detail without giving any background. So it's not a very, let's say, easy text. If you want to study Madhyamaka, or if you want to study the reasonings of Madhyamaka, this is probably not the ideal way to begin. So hopefully we'll be able to give you a little bit of background, and also hopefully interesting, maybe inspiring information to help you relate to the text, relate to Khyentse Wang, go deeper with other resources that we have also compiled. And I should also apologize, there's some construction work right next door to my room, and it started just like 10 minutes ago, so I was not able to go anywhere else. So I hope it's not too loud in the background. Shey, do you want to add anything to that introduction?
No, I think that's good. I'll get to everything specific when the time comes. So
Okay.
maybe proceed. Yeah.
All right. So one thing I wanted to add as an information I would like to share regarding the topic of Madhyamaka is some of the dangers related to the study of Madhyamaka. This is in particular something that the teachers generally emphasize this, of course, and I've recently translated a teaching by Khyentse Rinpoche on a text or a teaching called Parting from the Four Attachments. And so before he goes into his explanation of the fourth line, which teaches the view. He explains a little bit the dangers of relating to that to this very profound teaching on emptiness. So I thought it's quite interesting, and also I think quite important to keep that in mind when we study these teachings. So Khyentse Rinpoche mentions two main dangers. One is the dangers that pertain mainly to the teachers who expound emptiness, and the other one is from the point of view of the students who study the teaching on emptiness. So for the teachers, the main danger is that if it is not given with the right context, with the right skillful means, it is very possible that somebody who is not receiving these teachings in a correct way might dismiss them as something meaningless, because they do run very much against our common sense. And so if somebody hears these teachings, they might say, okay, this is you're telling me this is the most profound teachings that the Buddha expounded, but they absolutely make no sense. So the whole of this Buddhist project is nonsense, basically. And so in this way, if the teachings on emptiness are received in that way, and then the whole of the Buddha Dharma is thrown out of the window, that is, of course, a huge obstacle for the path. So the danger, Khyentse Rinpoche says here, is that by not sharing these teachings correctly, in the right framework, in the right order, maybe, with the right methods, one may create, unintentionally, of course, but it may create a condition that is an obstacle for the students to study these teachings. And that's, of course, a great mistake. So that's why it is often warned against teaching this profound subject prematurely, because it carries these dangers. And from the student's point of view, the danger is to just misunderstand that teaching, and develop some nihilistic view, completely dismissing the fundamental teachings of the Buddha of dependent arising, of the efficiency of cause and effect, which of course then becomes a major obstacle in one's path. And one destroys one's own path to liberation if one misapprehends that profound teaching. And because by dismissing, of course, the efficacy of cause and result, one may generate very harmful actions that will risk a grave danger for the path. So the approach then is to take this teaching slowly, carefully, under the guidance of a qualified teacher, of course. So for that, by all these many great masters, and most importantly is then to rely on the basis of these texts by these great masters, on the guidance of a qualified living teacher who can explain them and clarify our doubts correctly, so that we don't fall into any of these extremes, grasping this teaching in a wrong way. In fact, there is a very famous quote which I want to reproduce or paraphrase, which is that grasping as large as Mount Meru than to cling to the view of emptiness. And also that's from a sutra, and Nagarjuna also teaches that the teaching on emptiness, or the nectar of emptiness, was taught in order to free the mind from all views. And those who make the teaching on emptiness into a view are completely lost, actually. So, yeah, so that's that's what I wanted to share in regard to the dangers of teaching emptiness and receiving the teaching on emptiness. So we have to be from the student side and from the teacher side. Not that Shey and I don't think we consider ourselves teachers. We're just sharing some of the work that we have done. But generally, there's these dangers associated with the teachings on emptiness. But of course, on the positive side,
Christian, can
yeah.
I just briefly say that there is a connectivity issues with your stream, so it's kind of a coming and going. So
Oh, really? Okay.
maybe you can take a couple of minutes to reboot, and meanwhile, Shey, can you take over? I know it's a bit spontaneous, but I think it's better to do it in the beginning rather than, risk missing something important, especially in the light
Yes.
of what you just said. Would that be okay? Shey, can I spotlight you for a second, and maybe Christian will take 5 minutes to reboot his system, and maybe Wi-Fi will start working.
Shall I just continue on the same topic? Or?
Yes, please.
I just switched to Wi-Fi. Is it better now? Is
Oh,
it
you
stable?
did?
Yeah. I was on
Well,
a hotspot. Now I'm on a
okay.
Wi-Fi again.
I
Is
think
it
it
okay?
is better, but we will only know because it's coming kind of every 2, 3 minutes, like a little bit of a lag sort of patch.
Hmm.
So let's just try. I think it's better. Let's just try
Okay.
with the Wi-Fi, and
All
Shey,
right.
thanks for being ready to back up.
Okay. So what I'll do now, that's before we go into the text itself, I'll share. Can I share screen? It says if I share screen, it will stop others' computers' sound share.
Yes, you can share the screen. I was sharing my sound for the
Okay.
introductory song, but I
All
turned
right.
it off now.
Okay. Okay. Um, okay. So this is now to give some context for this teaching, the specific teaching on the Madhyamaka reasonings. This is from another text by Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo called Seeds of Words and Their Meanings. So it was published by Khyentse Vision Project. You can see the ID here. Maybe Ina can share the link to that in the chat. And so in this text, Khyentse Wangpo gives a little bit more of a background. So he quotes Arya Deva by saying, first turn away from what is unwholesome, in the middle negate the self, and in the end overturn all foundations for views. Those who understand this are wise indeed. And then he explains, so I've cut out a little bit of the explanation on the first part, which is not the focus of our session. Turning away from what is wholesome is, of course, done by contemplating all the preliminary contemplations like the precious human life, impermanence, and so on. And then also all the method aspect of the path, loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta. So this is the first thing to do. And that's why also I can share a little anecdote. Khenchen Abba Rinpoche, when he was teaching the view in the context of a 10-day retreat at IBA, some people came just before the very last day in order to just receive these teachings. And Khenchen Abba Rinpoche was so careful when he taught this. And so he said, there is the option either to continue that, but in this case, the newcomers cannot join now because they need to have received all the preliminary explanations. Otherwise, the teachings on the view will not be meaningful and efficient, and maybe even harmful, as I pointed out before. So then the other option was if they join, then we have to just make a general explanation, but we cannot go into any detail. So that was the care that Khyentse Rinpoche brought to teaching this very profound subject. And then for the second line here, in the middle, negate the self, Khyentse Wangpo explains, at the time of cultivating ultimate bodhicitta, the view that negates the self, belief in the self is negated by cutting elaborations of apprehending things as truly existent. And that's so important, that is only the very first step of the view. And then, in the end, overturn all foundation for views. In the end, since karma and afflictions have their origin in thoughts apprehending things as truly existent, which in turn comes from conceptual elaborations or clinging to signs, the foundation of the view that sees things as not truly existent is negated as well. So this is the main point I wanted to highlight here is this part. So the view that sees things as not truly existent, that view has to be negated as well. So this is where, when the teaching on emptiness is apprehended and clung to just as a mere negation, and one clings to emptiness as a reality, as the ultimate truth, then not only can it be harmful, as explained earlier, as dismissing or overriding the teachings on the law of karma and so on, but also it cannot be truly liberating because there is still grasping to things as not truly existent. In other words, there is another extreme. So all of this has to be negated. And when this is embraced with skillful means, there arises the pristine wisdom of omniscience. That being so, and here's the instruction itself, that being so, rather than continually bringing forth the certainty that all phenomena lack inherent existence through the key points of dependent arising, one should ascertain that the object, emptiness, is not something to be apprehended in any way as existent or non-existent, and so forth, because it is not the domain of the dualistic mind. So this goes, of course, very quickly. It goes very, very deep. And it's famously expounded in at the very beginning of Shantideva's Bodhicharya Avatara, where it says that the ultimate is not the domain of the mind, is not something that can be apprehended by the conceptual mind. So, in other words, we cannot think our way to emptiness. We can only take the rational mind to a certain level until all of the foundations for the rational mind clinging to things in one way or another way completely collapses. So this is the approach or the method that Madhyamaka uses, is to rationally, with the use of the skillful means of conceptual analysis, bring the mind to a way where no way of conceptualizing holds anymore, where it doesn't make sense and therefore collapses. And that's where all of this letting go, complete letting go, has to occur. Not prematurely, of course. And that is where the effort and the discipline of personal investigation is actually very important, because it is not something where shortcuts can be made by assuming, okay, I know already, it should be like that. That's maybe we do understand something already about these views, but in order for that to not remain a conceptual construct, but actually reach a point where it becomes part of the practice, it has to be working through our different assumptions that we have. And that can only happen in a gradual manner according to the approach of the Paramitayana. So that's the framework I wanted to give for the teaching on emptiness and the Madhyamaka reasoning, in what context it can be understood. And before I hand over to Shey, who will then go into the text itself, I wanted to give a brief overview in the works of Khyentse Wangpo. Where do we encounter the teachings on Madhyamaka? So he did not write any, as far as we know, any commentary, detailed commentary on any of the great Madhyamaka works. But of course, the teachings on Madhyamaka are pervading pretty much all of his writings to one extent or to some in one way or another. And we do have certain treatises that explicitly deal with that subject. So one text, I think it's the longest treatise that Khyentse Wangpo wrote about the different philosophical views, is this text here I highlighted, An Ocean of Amazing Elegant Sayings, a treatise that illuminates the classifications of the vehicles. It is sometimes in Tibetan, that literature is called Drumta, or the philosophical tenet systems. It's a rather long text, 133 Tibetan pages. So it's going to be something, I guess, about 220, 30 pages in English. And Khyentse Wangpo wrote this at the age of 16. So this also tells us something about his maturity. Even as a young man, he was already so well versed in these teachings that he was able to compose a philosophical treatise of that magnitude and importance. Another standalone text he wrote on the subject of emptiness. Now, not Madhyamaka per se, but the subject of emptiness is a commentary on the Heart Sutra, which is much briefer, of course. We also published that in our reading room already. And then we have instructions, a middle-length text from which I just quoted is Seeds of Words and Meanings, that is based on the Sakya approach taught in different systems of Sutra and Tantra. And then we have various short notes or essays and notes. So from the essays, we have a very brief text, but very poignant on the distinction between Prasangika and Svatantrika Madhyamaka. That too has been published. I think we will share a document with everyone later, which has the links for all of these texts. And then, and this is something so beautiful about the works of Khyentse Wangpo, he wrote short essays or short works on the teachings of different views on that very subject. So you will have in his collected writings, you will have a text on the view of Shentong, and right after this, a text on the teachings on the view on the Madhyamaka view expounded by Tsongkhapa, which is completely different, of course, to Shentong. But in the world, in the universe of Khyentse Wangpo, that is not necessarily a problem. So he's just highlighting all of these are incredibly precious medicines, we can say. And in the pharmacy of Khyentse Wangpo, all of these are of equal importance and of equal value, and so he offers them very freely and without any distinctions. And luckily, all of these have been preserved and are available and now being translated. And hopefully soon, also these two soon available in English as well. And then you find mention of the teachings on Madhyamaka in his notes. So that is a very large collection of notes, which Shey will talk about. And of course, you also find his teachings on Madhyamaka in his songs. A very large portion of the collected writings of Khyentse Wangpo are songs of realizations, Vajra songs. And in a number of them, he also mentions the stages of the view or the different philosophical tenet systems and how the key points of these systems in very beautiful poetry. So this is only what I could find. I haven't explored the entire collection of the writings of Khyentse Wangpo. Our expert on this is Jamie, who is not here with us today, I think. I don't think he's here with us. So he has a better idea, of course, of everything that's in that collection. But just browsing through it, these are the main main texts I could identify that relate directly to Madhyamaka or to the teaching on emptiness by Khyentse Wangpo. And with this, I hand to Shey.
All right. Thank you very much, Christian, for that excellent background. Actually, we didn't do the introductory prayers, I believe.
Yes, we can do that. Let me share it right now. 1 second. Shey, do you want to lead us, or do you want me to do it?
Yeah, I can do it.
Okay.
In Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha sublime, we seek refuge until awakening. By virtue of our giving and the like, may we awaken to benefit all. In Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha sublime, we seek refuge until awakening. By virtue of our giving and the like, may we awaken to benefit all. In Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha sublime, we seek refuge until awakening. By virtue of our giving and the like, may we awaken to benefit all. The blessing of Manjushri appearing as the emanation of Vimalamitra, the 13th rebirth of Gyaltse Laje, Pemodong Limpa, holder of the 7 special transmissions, Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo, to you we pray. Oh, we also do mantle offering. The earth is perfumed with scented water and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon. Imagining this as the Buddha realm, I offer it, so that all beings may enjoy that pure realm. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. In accordance with the capabilities and the diverse aspirations of sentient beings, I ask you to turn the wheel of Dharma, of the greater, lesser, or conventional vehicles.
So now hopefully we have enough merit to understand more.
Yes. Okay, so yeah, that was, I think, a very helpful sort of background information from Christian. Now I'm going to discuss things in the sort of, at the text level, I suppose you could say. And actually, maybe what I'll do is share the screen so that the text is present. 1 second. Sorry, I'm using Christian. I'm using a different laptop at the moment because I also had internet troubles. Do you mind sharing your screen? Yeah, thank you.
You want to what you want to see?
Oh yeah, sorry. Just like the most obvious one. Just share the text on the side. Yeah.
Okay. And give me a minute, okay?
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I can talk while that's happening. So, when it comes to this text, as Christian has pointed out, it's very much not a usual text. Sort of what it is like a pastiche of notes taken from pre-existing works. And sometimes Khyentse Wangpo has sort of rearranged things. Sometimes he's added like topic markers, but basically the content. So like most of the headings, I think one we added in at editorial level, but most of the headings in the text, this is sort of Khyentse Wangpo's personal identification of the topic, right? But basically everything else seems to be taken from other places. And in places where I couldn't find a source, that doesn't actually mean that sort of there is no pre-existing work. It just means I couldn't find one. So this kind of text is called Zindri in Tibetan, which we translate as notes. But the Zindri actually, it's quite a flexible term. So it can range from very formal compositions, which might even have their own colophon, a title, and be properly arranged, to text like this, right? Which is like sort of quite a loose amalgamation of different notes. And we're not really sure exactly like how these came about. There's no colophon, for instance. So it could have just been that those who sort of compiled the Gabum, disciples of Khyentse Wangpo, discovered these pages, say in Khyentse Wangpo's meditation heart or something like that, and chose to preserve them. And so they've been introduced into the collected works. So then one of the sort of interesting features of these kinds of texts is that, of course, the content itself, even though it might not be as accessible in a more formally arranged text, it might be taken from other places. What it does show you is that it shows you what Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo himself was sort of interested in, let's say, or maybe what he thought was a particularly difficult passage, or for whatever reason he thought worth noting down, right? So I think that's something quite interesting for us to know. And it can also lead you to further studies, right? Yeah. So in translating a text like this, I would say actually until sort of the present age, it probably you probably wouldn't have done a very good job, right? In fact, it's probably only possible to translate this particular text around the current period of time because a lot of the passages that you find here had quite a lot of textual issues, by which I mean like there were misspellings or things were different actually to what they should be in the source material. And so if you're a translator, that can, of course, completely throw you off, right? But these days, because we have access to an incredible wealth of material online, you can do sort of quite a lot of detective work and find out first what are the original sources, and then you can compare them to what you have written down by Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo. And when necessary, and with caution, make corrections. Yeah. So in that sense, it's quite sort of a modern opportunity. Yeah. And I suppose the translation of this will just get easier and easier if we can set the robots to the task. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So actually, Christine, could you scroll up a little bit? Yeah. Yeah, so the title also, what we have here is an adornment for the ear to delight those of sharp intelligence, notes to remember the oral instructions of the sublime noble masters. So actually, this is not the title of this particular text. This is the title of a large collection of notes like this, which we find in the Khyentse Gabon, right? So the text itself doesn't actually have a specific title. So we've sort of added a short title, an explanation of Madhyamaka, the Bodhisattva path, and meditation, just for ease of identification. Yeah. Okay, and you can go back down maybe. Thank you, Christine.
That's Ina doing the work actually.
Oh, really? Thank you. That's very kind. Yeah. Yes. So yeah, in terms of the overall topics, as I've said, right, there's not like a clear formal structure to this text. So it's not immediately obvious how everything sort of fits together. However, it seems there's some utility to what I've forgotten her name now. Who was giving the talk?
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth, yes, sorry, forgive me. So she was saying that this text really sort of emphasizes the profound and the vast, right? And I think that's true, right? So you start with two sections which sort of represent more the profound view from different perspectives, actually. From, I would say, the second turning of the wheel of Dharma to the third turning, yeah. And then the rest is more concerned with the vast, things like the stages of the path, bodhicitta, and issues related to that. Yeah. So I'm just gonna go through sort of each section and talk a little bit about the kinds of sources that Khyentse Wangpo was relying on. Uh, Right, so this first one is a presentation of the four great arguments upheld by the Madhyamikas. So we will get into this in more detail, this particular section, later on in the tutorial. But for now, I mean, it's just good to know, right, that the base source for this particular section is the, how do they usually translate this? I think the Truptadze is the treasury of precious tenet systems, usually in translation. So this is one of the seven treasuries of Longchenpa, one of which is concerned with sort of philosophical tenet systems. And within that, you have this discussion of the great arguments of the Madhyamikas. Yeah. So these great arguments are then also, this presentation of the great arguments is also sort of quoted by Jigme Lingpa in his own commentary to the Treasury of Precious Qualities, the Yundense, which, I mean, some of you might know this. It's quite a famous text of Jigme Lingpa. And I think it's translated, but the personal commentary, the auto commentary by Jigme Lingpa is untranslated. But if you look there, then you find Longchenpa's presentation of the great arguments basically repeated verbatim. But if you compare them at a very sort of granular level, then you can see that there are sort of some characteristic quirks to Jigme Lingpa's presentation, slight differences in spelling and so on and so forth. And what we find in Khyentse Wangpo's writing here mirrors Jigme Lingpa's presentation, much more so. So I think that's where it would have been taken from. That's where he was sort of copying, so to speak. Yeah. Okay. And I'll come back a little bit to this section before I pass back to Christian. But let's move to the next one now. Yeah. So the assertion of the great Madhyamika of Madhyamaka of definitive meaning that all phenomena are subsumed within three defining characteristics. By the way, this sometimes you see Madhyamika and Madhyamaka. Actually, the difference here is that Madhyamika refers to the sort of proponent of Madhyamaka, whereas Madhyamaka actually refers to the I suppose either the philosophy or the truth itself, right? The middle way. So this great Madhyamaka of definitive meaning, as Elizabeth pointed out, it has some resonance with the other emptiness tradition. So in Tibet, you have a general distinction between other emptiness Madhyamaka and self-emptiness Madhyamaka, Rantong and Shentong. In the Shentong tradition, or the other emptiness tradition, mainly the presentation is based off of the third turning of the wheel of Dharma. And it's based off commentaries by like Asanga and Vasubandhu. And in that context, what they really emphasize in terms of the ultimate is non-dual wisdom. So also in the way in which they present phenomena, they do so actually with these sort of three defining characteristics. Sometimes they're also called the three natures. So I would like to talk more about them, but I think if we do that, we will run out of time. But it's sufficient to know that basically you have three: the imagined nature, the dependent nature, and the consummate nature. And these you can map them quite usefully to the two truths, but they're a little bit different in their approach. And basically, every single phenomenon can be classified under one of those, right? Either it will be an imagined nature, a dependent nature, or a consummate nature. Yeah. So this particular section, it took a lot of work trying to discover what its source was. But I did find that there's a Nyingma Tantra called the Taktung Gelpo, and I think it's the Dege edition, the Dege sort of publication of that Tantra, you have these little notes added, right? So often you find this in Tibetan texts. You might have like a commentary, and when it's sort of published, somebody adds in notes in small font, which sort of gloss the main text. And so we don't know who the author of these notes were, but they are there. And you can see that they map very closely to what we find here in this presentation of the three defining characteristics. So it could be that there's another source which both those notes and Khyentse Wangpo's presentation is based on, but in terms of a reference, that's the only one that I personally could find. Yeah. So as Christian pointed out, have we published his Shentong text? I think maybe not, right?
I don't think so, no.
But it will be published.
Certainly.
Yeah. Right. So when we have that, anyway, if you want to know more about the Shentong tradition, you could also consult that. Yeah.
We do have in the reading room, I think, published a translation by Lopen Sunam Jamso, where Khyentse Wangpo talks about distinctions between various schools and including I think Prasangika and Sakya and Dzogchen and Shentong and so on. So I think as far as I know from the published works, that's the work that is most directly explaining points of Shentong. But maybe I saw that Jamie is here. Do you know, maybe Jamie, if there's other works on Shentong that we've published?
Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself. No. No, we don't have other Shentong texts at the moment. It's still in the pipeline. Yeah, it's gonna come out soon. There's also a very long Siddhanta Drupta text that Lopen Sonam Jamso translated that will come out eventually. There is some Shentong in there too.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, so the Shentong approach, of course, is a little bit different to the one that we're mainly discussing. But you can also say that they both, when it comes to meditative equipoise, both approaches come down to the fact that you are totally free from mental constructs. How they then describe what is experienced during that time is then a little bit different. Yeah. Okay, we can go to the next section. Right, so this is 22 divisions in the Bodhisattva's generation of bodhicitta pertaining to the thresholds Thresholds meaning it sort of refers to the threshold of attainment with respect to the paths and bhumis, actually, yeah. So that's a technical term, yeah. And so you can see how these 22 divisions of bodhicitta can then be related to the 5 paths, right? And this particular quote is from the Abhisamaya Alamkara. So this particular discussion, interestingly, is pretty much exactly the same to Gampopa's discussion of the same thing in the Jewel Ornament of Liberation. Yeah, I think that's enough for that one. Yes. Okay, so then the 4th section, yes, semantic glosses of the 10 Bodhisattva grounds. So this particular section seems to be based mainly on what's called the lexicon in 2 volumes, which is a text which really explores different technical terms written during the early translation period. And so it takes technical terms and then explains them based on their literal meaning, right? So you can see that for each of the bodhisattva grounds discussed here, within the definition, you find the direct term of the specific ground incorporated, right? So you can see how the meaning of you can see why that particular term is chosen, right? And this lexicon in 2 volumes, or the Jajobambo Nipa, also has very important guidelines for translators. And that, I think, is translated, actually. Yeah. So this was really like the early period when they were first had like this sort of like these major translation projects in Tibet. Yeah. Okay, so the next section. Yeah. Thank you. And then this section, again, yeah. It was very hard to find sources, but there do seem to be some correspondences to this lexicon in 2 volumes. Yeah. Okay. You can go to the next section. We have.
I think I did. Maybe, can you
Oh, yeah.
see?
No, it's good. Yeah. Yes, alternating meditation, samadhis of the 9 absorptions, right? So this alternating meditation, I believe it's discussed in the Abhisamaya Lamkara. And it sort of involves these sort of states of samadhi where you skip between different levels, basically. Yeah. Yeah, so this particular passage is from it seems to correspond to Longchenpa's commentary to his treasury of precious wish-fulfilling jewels, yeah, the Yishinzi, yeah. At least to parts of that. And then there's also some correspondence with the auto commentary to the Treasury of Precious Qualities by Jigme Lingpa that we mentioned before. Yeah. So this is probably like the main theme in the text. Actually, there's like strong sort of cribbing from the works of Longchenpa and Jigme Lingpa here. Yeah. And I believe this is the case in the final section as well. In the final section, there's a fair amount of similarity to Longchenpa's sort of own commentary to Finding Rest in the Nature of Mind. I'm not sure how that's translated now. I think that was a publication, but yeah. And actually, if you go to the last line, of that final section. You can see this, the concentrations of Pratpala and below, and so on and so forth. So this particular line, if you look in Jigme Limba's, I think it's, the chariot, his auto commentary to the Treasury of Precious Qualities, sort of concerned with this topic, right? You have two separate lines, which Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo actually seems to have taken both of those two lines, which are addressing this same issue, and then he rearranged both of them into one sentence. So that's sort of part of, it seems, how he creatively approaches these notes, actually. Sometimes he'll just directly copy from other places, but sometimes he will rearrange things. Yeah. Okay, so I think that's enough. But maybe you could go back to the first section. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So that's all sort of details, right? So now I suppose Christian will take you through a broader explanation of the sort of great arguments of the Madhyamikas. But just to point out like a couple of things before he does. So first of all, you have 4 great arguments mentioned here. But often also you will see 5 great arguments mentioned. It seems that in Longchenpa's presentation, what he does is he sort of fits the great dependent origination argument into 2. So you end up with 5 different approaches, but it's sort of subsumed within a 4-fold framework. The other thing I think to note here, this is quite important, is in the last part of this discussion of the great arguments. If you just go down like a little bit. As to that arranged as an argument of non-affirming negation. Right, so this particular section is very technical. And again, it's taken from the Truptatse, the Treasury of Precious Tenet Systems. But in the Treasury of Precious Tenet Systems, actually, the discussion of this particular argument is separated into 3. And Khyentse Wangpo has just quoted from the 3rd part of that. And it's a very technical part, right? So if you really want to understand this particular argument, then I think at least it would be better to just consult the presentation as a whole in the Treasury of Precious Tenet Systems. Or also, for instance, and we'll get into this a bit later, there's the Ornament of the Middle Way with Mipam Rinpoche's commentary, which the whole text actually is based on that particular argument. Yeah. Yes. And okay, and then also one more note on this. If you go up just to the beginning again. So the subject and mere entity is ultimately something that has not arisen from itself, another, both, or without cause, and as such is empty of all entities that arise. This is analogous, for instance, to a mere object universal being devoid of entities. So the object universal, just this example that he uses, it might seem a little bit unusual. It's sort of a technical term, but you can understand it in a fairly simple way as a concept, if you like. Yeah. So when you are thinking of things appear to you as a thought, right? So there's sort of a conceptual appearance. And then we identify that appearance with the real thing. And so that sort of conceptual version of the thing is known as the object universal, right? So it's not actually the thing itself. So I think this is why the argument, the example is being used here, right? It's representing something that appears to be a certain way, right? But actually does not exist in that way. Yeah, I think this Sakya Pandita, he has a nice verse. Right, to thought which is confused by nature, a linguistic referent, a reflection of the linguistic referent dawns, right? Right, so, and then interpreting that to be an external object, we designate it to be sort of the object expressed in language. Yeah. So that particular verse is explaining a similar concept to what is intended by the object universal. So you have sort of a reflection that appears to thought, and then naturally we identify it with real things outside, but thought can't actually access reality. So, of course, it is devoid of an actual real entity. So I think with that, Christian, you can continue.
Maybe before we do that, we can open the floor. So if there's any questions, clarifications needed about what Shey in particular talked about regarding the overview and the sources of this text. And then after that, we can talk a little bit about these arguments. So if there's any questions, you can unmute yourselves or write in the chat also.
You can raise your virtual hand, which is in the React box in the bottom panel, and then we will unmute you.
Shey, there is a question about the Tunchi in the chat.
Oh.
Can you read it, Shey or Christian, so we can have it in the recording?
I can't seem to. Okay, there's lots in
Okay.
the chat. Wait.
Let me
I've got it. Okay. I've got it. Yeah. Good question. Yeah. Okay. So can we say there is a difference between the concept object universal and the term mental image, sometimes used with the Tenchi? This pertains actually to quite a strong debate. So in Tibet, actually, there's what's known as the Ngarapa, sort of the early generation, and the Chirapa, in terms of explaining the Pramana tradition, right? And so, not to get into too much detail, right? But the Pramana tradition is sort of a framework for understanding the means to knowledge, reliable knowledge, and it uses its own set of technical terms. And that's where this notion of the object universal comes from. So when it comes to the notion of the mental image, you have two things, right? One is sort of an appearance, or you could say an image that appears to thought or within conceptual consciousness. You could even say it's like the form that conceptual consciousness assumes, if you like. That mental image is itself not separate from consciousness. So strictly speaking, there are some who would argue that you can't really say that image itself is the object universal, right? Because the image being inseparable from consciousness has a certain level of existence. Yeah. But then on top of that, then you have this identity which conceptual consciousness imputes onto that image. And that would be sort of the more strictly speaking object universal. Yeah. And that's why I don't translate it as mental image, but there are different opinions actually. Yeah. There are some who do just say the object universal is the image itself. Yeah. Which also involves this added layer of conceptual superimposition but would still encompass the image itself. Yeah. If you're sort of into these kinds of technical debates and you're a little bit brave, then you can read Recognizing Reality by George Dreyfus, and all of these kinds of issues are got into there. Yeah.
There is another question in the chat. Not sure how. Do you guys want to answer it now? Did Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo write about the text elaborate about the emptiness of mere object universal, like cowness is empty, using Dharmakirti apoha theory? There are just particulars cow. Cow is just an exclusion of non-cows. Thank you. I think you first should explain what that question means before we actually start answering it. At least for me, please.
This is interesting. The pramana is getting traction. They say in Tibet sometimes that Madhyamaka and pramana are like crossed lions. Yeah, the crossed lions' heads of Madhyamaka and pramana. Utse Tsengi Jingnu. Yeah. It's like a term they use. I asked Geshe once what that sort of means. I think it's because if you have two like crossed lions' heads, you can't be sort of threatened from any direction, because whichever way you approach, the lion's sort of facing you down. And he also specified actually that pramana in that context would refer more to the path of reasoning. Anyway, so this, yes, it's definitely beyond the scope of this tutorial to get too much into the notion of universals, cowness, and so on and so forth. So first of all, what Khyentse Wangpo is doing is he's using this as an example, first of all, right? So it's not like a direct negation based on the apoha theory. So this apoha theory is like a central theory in the Pramana tradition. Dharmakirti was one of the main commentators of that. And then you also, before him, you had Dignaga. Apoha, which you could translate as exclusion, is central to their presentation of thought and conceptuality. And actually, if you want to understand thought and conceptuality, then it's really good to study like thought as in when we usually say thought, right? Which is like, I'm thinking, the sort of general noise that's happening in your mind, right? That kind of thought, they really explain that very, very clearly in the Pramana tradition, yeah. And the notion of exclusion is connected to this, right? So I don't know whether exclusion in general is the reason that he's using this term here. One of the main, although that is present, yeah. But I think probably one of the main senses indicated by the object universal, right, is this sense in which thought confuses the object universal for the real thing. Yeah. So like this is always the case of thought. I think they say, like that non-conceptual consciousness is sort of dumb, like meaning, I'm not sure if they mean like it's stupid or it can't speak. It might also mean it can't speak. And then conceptual consciousness is blind, right? So the conceptual consciousness, when you have a thought about something, you don't actually perceive the thing itself with that thought, right? What you have is a conceptual imputation. But that imputation, you have to confuse for the real things that the non-conceptual consciousness perceives. Because if you don't make that fundamental confusion, then you can't function in the world, right? You know, if you could never feel like there was a relationship between your thoughts and things outside of it, you can see how that would get you into trouble, right? You would have no way of understanding anything, right? But so you make that confusion, but at the same time, it helps you act. Yeah. So it's
Maybe can I
possible.
just jump in? Just as an example for that, if we don't think that the glass of water in the kitchen, which I cannot see, is that I have in my mind now is actually going to quench my thirst, it's difficult for me to physically make that move to the kitchen and get it because I have to create what they call merging of that physical reality out there in the kitchen with that concept that is in my mind now. I merge them, and that's the basis for any activity. And because it functions, because when I do go there and I drink and it quenches my thirst, it just reconfirms that confusion. So we never question that if that's actually a valid perception or if it's just a mental image that has no direct connection to that physical glass of water.
Right. Right. So I think it's possible that that's why the example is used here, right? This basic confusion of the concept for the real thing. So the concept you have is not the real thing, right? But you sort of thought presumes that, and that fundamental mistake allows you to do things. Yeah.
But to answer the question, I don't know. I assume that the subject of Pramana might be addressed maybe in a little more detail in this long text that we mentioned at the beginning. This Jumta text, maybe, but Pramana itself is generally not often a subject of these tenet systems. Traditionally, they are more expositions of the Indian philosophical schools and then the various Indian Buddhist philosophical schools, and then sometimes added to that specific Tibetan views or systems. But I don't remember, at least in my studies, but I haven't studied Jumta a lot, but I don't remember seeing a Jumta text where the tradition of Pramana itself is also discussed in detail. So all that to say, I don't know if Khyentse Wangpo. I haven't seen a text where he talks about this in detail. Again, can I ask Jamie if he knows? Is he still here?
Yeah, but there is not much about pramana, unfortunately, in
Ah,
the Dutta
okay.
text. Yeah, there's generally very few pramana material in the
Hmm.
Songbum of Khyentse Wangpo. Yeah.
Also, Jamie, I just sent you a message. Can you check? It's related to what we're doing here. So in the Zoom, but in the private chat.
Yeah, let me check. Yeah,
Okay.
you can just go on.
All right. Okay. Shall we discuss a little bit the 4 or 5 reasonings?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Um, so yeah, one thing with these reasonings, there's a few things that are, I think, quite useful to keep in mind, which actually I'm not really sure they're important to keep in mind at the beginning. Maybe it's actually quite good to be very confused in terms of what are we actually talking about before we use these reasonings. Because sometimes if we come to this kind of analysis already knowing what it's all about, it's very easy to kind of cop out and distinguishing correctly relative truth, ultimate truth, and then not really doing the work of investigation. That's so sometimes, yeah. Very quickly, though, once we go into that, we will see how that distinction will become very, very crucial, and how in our daily life that we don't actually make that distinction ever. And that's a big cause of frustration and trouble, and ultimately all forms of suffering, of course. So there's two things that I think are important to keep in mind. One is that what Madhyamaka is doing is not, and I think I mentioned that at the beginning, it is not about creating a new view of things. Like this is the ultimate. It is really liberating the mind of conceiving anything in any way in the ultimate sense. So that's an important aspect. So it's not, and that really plays into the approach we have to this tenet systems, the study of the different tenet systems, the different philosophical approaches within India, or even also in Western philosophical and religious thought, and then also within the Buddhist traditions. It's not about proving other people wrong. It's not about identifying this is the view of that person, that is that person, and they're wrong because of this and that and that. It's just different views of that we may or may not have as a basis for our relationship with the world and with experience. And so, of course, these views have then been identified with different schools, and there has been philosophical debates, historical debates between masters of different traditions, where Nagarjuna would take up the ideas and the notions of one particular school, refute them, and in that way establish the correct view by not being a view, so to speak. But I don't think it's that efficient in terms of one's own practice to approach it in that purely academic way, as identifying other people's mistakes. So I think the more useful way is to see how does the view identified as XYZ, how do I actually have that view in my own way of relating to my experience or not? And in this way, these investigations can be actually very useful methods to dealing with our own assumption and with our own approach to our experience and to reality. And the interesting thing is that if we have a certain assumption, and we all certainly do have certain assumptions about reality, is that if these assumptions were true, then the closer we would look, the clearer they would have to become. If the way we assume things work, things arise in the world, if that's actually true, then the closer we investigate that, the clearer that reality should emerge because it's true. And unless we have a thinking mistake, but otherwise, if the thinking is clear and if it's in harmony with the reality, then it should be confirmed the deeper we investigate and the clearer we observe. So in case we are approaching our assumptions, investigating them, and then the object becomes less and less tangible, or less and less graspable, less and less clear, that might be a very good indication that the assumptions that we had at the basis were not correct. There's a fundamental mistake in the way we view things. And so this is, in my understanding, the really incredible work that can be done on the basis of these arguments. So let's look at them. Okay, wait. Okay. So here is a from another text by Khyentse Wangpo. an overview, a very briefer overview of these here 5 reasonings. Shey mentioned that in the text that we are discussing, Khyentse Wangpo talks about 4 reasonings, but I think more commonly, and this is the case here, 5 reasonings are distinguished. So we can read from this text. The tenet system of the Madhyamikas determines that all phenomena are birthless through 5 great reasonings. The first, the investigation into causes. The Vajra splinters on the 4 possibilities argues that, what, am I reading this? Yeah. Argues that an ear of grain does not arise from itself and so on. So that's the very, very famous first, a reference to the very famous first verse of Nagarjuna's Mula Madhyamaka Karika, the root verses on the middle way. So the object that we are investigating generally is phenomena, any and all phenomena, and how they arise and what relationships are between phenomena. Basically, what is this whole thing that we call reality? And so this investigation can be done through various approaches. And the first one is analyzing the causes of phenomena. When we say phenomena arise, nobody generally argues the fact that there are phenomena arising in the world. Everybody is basically on agreement with that. So when we accept there are phenomena arising in the world, then first let us look at the causes in terms of the relationship the cause has with the result. So that is the first examination, looking at the cause. Does the effect arise from a cause that is the same, that is itself? Or does it arise from a cause that is different from the result? Or does it arise from a combination of both? Or does it arise without a cause? And we're going to go a little bit more into detail in a minute on that very first argument. Then the second investigation, here you can see I wrote the sources of these arguments. The second, investigating existence and non-existence. So here the focus of the analysis is the result itself, the produced object. And here the question is that phenomena that is being produced existent at the time of the cause, or is it not existent at the time of the cause? So all these investigations have to be actually done very, very slowly and carefully without too much, let's say, assumptions about dependent arising. If we go into these debates already knowing everything about dependent arising, it's a little bit of a lost cause. So then they won't really stick these arguments with us because we already have the so-called the solution in the back of our heads. So yeah, that's another thing to keep in mind. So the source of that is again Mula Madhyamaka Karika, the first chapter, verse number 6. Then the third great argument is taken from a text by Gyanagarbha called Sattva Dvaya Vibhanga, the differentiation or distinguishing the two truths. And here cause and result are both investigated. So there are 4 possibilities for the arising of phenomena. Either one cause gives rise to one result, a 1-to-1 correspondence, or one cause gives rise to multiple results, or multiple causes give rise to one result, or multiple causes give rise to multiple results. This argument is, so Gyanagarbha is one of the, I think, generally regarded as one of the important Indian masters of the Svatantrika tradition, as opposed to the Prasangika tradition, which became very dominant in Tibet. Then we have the fourth argument. This is what Shey earlier alluded to, the neither singular nor multiple argument. That investigates the essence of the phenomenon itself. So is a phenomenon a singular thing, an entity, an autonomous, independent entity, or is it composed of parts? And therefore is multiple, is a multiplicity of phenomena. And so that is by Shantarakshita, his Ornament to the Middle Way, Madhyamaka Alankara. And that is, I think, the very first verse. And the whole text, as Shey pointed out earlier, is based on that particular argument. That is, I think, if I remember correct, I don't know if it, in my memory, it's Mipam Rinpoche who says that this is one of the clearest and maybe let's call it easiest argument to follow. But as far as I remember, it's studied mainly because that particular text, Madhyamaka Alankara, has become important in particular in the Nyingma tradition through the commentary of Mipam Rinpoche. So I haven't seen, for example, in the Sakya tradition, I haven't seen this text being taught. I don't know if the Shedras, I don't see any major Sakya commentator commenting on the Madhyamaka Alankara. I think there was a commentary by Rongten, but it was lost. I think it's not been recovered from wherever it was lost, which is very unfortunate. So I think he famously upheld that lineage as well, but I don't see it being taught nowadays anymore, in the Sakya tradition at least. So that argument quite simply says if things are either, there's no third possibilities, things are either singular entities or they are composed of various entities. But when you analyze any particular entity, you will see that it has parts, and therefore the singularity does not apply. And because each of these individual parts again can be further analyzed into further more constituent parts, multiplicity also does not apply, because multiplicity is just another word for many individual parts, and therefore that also does not apply. And then you have the fifth argument, which is dependent arising itself, that analyzes everything in the sense of cause, result, and the process of arising. And that is, of course, the subject, we can say, of the entire Madhyamaka teachings, because famously Nagarjuna also says that emptiness is not, I don't remember the exact quote, but he equates dependent arising with emptiness. In other words, that the fact that phenomena arise in dependence is synonymous with the fact that they lack any inherent nature, and that is their emptiness. So their nature is nothing else but the emptiness of inherent existence established through their dependent arising. And there will be many sources for this. This is just one particular quote that explains this from Nagarjuna, but there are many, many others. And also, very importantly, from the sutras, we have the Rice Seedling Sutra, which has been published on 84,000, translated by Dotulku Rinpoche, who is also translating with us and working with us. So you can consult that sutra as well, the Rice Seedling Sutra on 84,000. Okay, so let us look a little bit into that. Okay, I'm not clear about my screen sharing. Can you still see my screen?
Yes, we can. All good.
Okay, good. Okay. So, okay. So the first, through the Vajra splinters argument, the object of refutation is refuted via an analysis of the cause of the object of refutation. So again, in other words, the Vajra splinters argument analyzes the cause of the arising of phenomena. The subject, a mere entity, so any phenomenon, is ultimately something that is not arisen from itself or from itself, another, both, or without cause, and as such is empty of all entities that arise. So one important distinction we have here from this argument, from the presentation of this argument, to the verse by Nagarjuna. Let's see if you can see the difference, actually. I'm just going to read it and let's see if you can spot the quite important difference. Not from itself, not from another, not from both, nor without a cause, never in any way is there any existing thing that has arisen. So can you see the very important difference between these two quotes? Um, Anyone?
Can you go back to the previous one?
Sorry, I'm struggling a little bit with my sharing. So here, that is the text by Khyentse Wangpo based on Jinmelingpa based on Longchenpa, and this is the verse by Nagarjuna. So I'm gonna tell you, unless somebody wants to engage in discussion, which is more than welcome. I'll have to switch
Please tell us.
to this screen. 1 second.
I'm gonna say on behalf of everyone.
I can. Unfortunately, I lost my. I cannot see any one of you anymore. Wait, I'm gonna stop sharing for a moment. Okay. Now I can see you. All right. Sorry for that. Did anyone see a difference between these two quotes? Really? Okay, I'm gonna tell you then. The difference is this word here, ultimately. So in Nagarjuna's verse, there is no reference, no qualification here. It's just that he says there is never any existing thing that ever arises, not from itself, not from other, not from both, and not without a cause. But Khyentse Wangpo qualifies this. He says ultimately. So in this way, he already makes a very, very crucial distinction, and he kind of gives us the solution for that whole problem, which actually we don't have at the beginning, because in the way usually, or not usually, in the way we relate to reality, we don't make that distinction between ultimate and conventional. So Nagarjuna, without qualifying it in any way, he just says, okay, there is no arising of phenomena, which sounds absurd, of course. Okay, so then how does he analyze that? So he gives 4 possibilities. If we talk about the arising of phenomena, it means we're talking about, we accept that there are causes and that there are results in the world. So there are these two categories of phenomena. And everybody would agree with that. Nobody would say that's stupid. Of course, we may say that it's stupid, but we don't function in a way that would show that we don't believe in it. Because of course, we do things expecting certain outcomes. So then there's different ways to relate to these categories of cause and result, and more importantly, to their relationship. So if we say we accept causes and results, there's two possible relationships that causes and results can have. Either they can be the same or they can be different. And in terms of the arising, either something arises from a cause or something arises without any cause. There's only these two possibilities. Because they are mutually completely exclusive and each cover everything that the other doesn't cover. So either something arises with a cause or without a cause. If something arises from a cause, what is the quality of that cause? And what is its relationship to the result? And this is where we have these three possibilities. Either the cause is identical to the result, and this is the first option that is being refuted, or it's something that is inherently different. So these also are two mutually exclusive categories. Or if we are very smart, we can create a third one, which is a combination. It's both. So this is now purely on the basis of logical approach to the relationship of causes and results. We can categorize causes and results in this way. And then the commentators explain how these different views have been adopted in various philosophical schools in India. So usually that first category of causes being identical to results or results being identical to the cause, meaning things arise from themselves, that is a school that is identified as the Samkhya view, which is one of the main and maybe some people say the most influential philosophical system of classical Indian thought, because it influenced many, many other schools. So the idea here is that basically the school says that there's two main categories in the world. One is the mind, and the other one is matter. Or nature, we can say. So one is called Prakriti, and the mind is called Purusha, I think. And so they say that all phenomena of the world, of this functioning causally functioning world, all of those are Prakriti. And their nature is just one. It's all just Prakriti. Everything that we see is just an apparent manifestation of the potential of Prakriti, but the nature of this is never changed. It is just Prakriti itself. It just appears in different ways, but from the side of its own inherent nature, the cause is the result, and the result is in the cause. So they are not different identities. So the way that this is being refuted is then to say, well, if causes and results are identical, there is no point to arising, because things would just be endlessly reproducing themselves from themselves. There would be no change in the world because everything would just be as it is. There's there's endless repetition of the same arising, and therefore arising itself would be completely pointless. So in this way, it's general. So these are very, very broad summaries of these arguments, of course. So but generally it is explained that arising from itself does not make sense. Otherwise, things would never change. There would no be any actual noticeable difference between causes and results. So then the second argument, and this is the one which is, I think, intuitively the one that most people would adhere to, is to say, no, things arise from causes which are different from the results. Because that's just how things appear to us. Causes seem to be in a certain way, and then you have results that are different. That kind of confirms our direct experience. So here, the basis for that view is that Nagarjuna is refuting is a Buddhist view, which is rooted in the Abhidharma ontology. So to have some understanding of that, it is very useful to study Abhidharma, the theory of dharmas. So the understanding that everything arises based on causes and conditions is, of course, very important in all Buddhist schools. But there are different views to understand that arising. So in the Abhidharma ontology, one speaks of the momentary existence of dharmas, of individual phenomena, which can be reduced to the smallest particles of the physical world, of matter, and individual moments of mind. And these are regarded as ultimately real phenomena. And they exist only for a single moment. So in other words, you have the apparent continuity of phenomena is nothing but a replacement of individual dharmas that seem similar, but that are independent and they are causally effective, but independent phenomena. So then Nagarjuna refutes that idea by saying that in this case, if we accept that, then anything could arise from any other thing. Because if we take two moments in time, time one is the moment of the cause, and we take time two, the moment of the result. If the cause, time one, is different, which means inherently it's a different independent phenomenon from the result, then what makes that cause, T1, time one, different from any other phenomenon that is also present at time one, if they are inherently different? So in other words, any cause would be equivalent to any non-cause. And if that's the case, then anything can arise from any other phenomena. There is no relationship that can be traced if one thing, a result arises from a cause that is inherently different from that cause. And so in this way, the idea of phenomena results arising from causes that are different is also refuted. And then we have the third and fourth possibility is that things arise from both themselves and other, which is often very quickly refuted because it says, well, that's just a combination of the first two views, and both of them don't make sense, so it's impossible that a combination of them would make sense. That also does not apply. And then the fourth view is that that's assigned to another school of thought in India, the Charvaka school, which is a materialist philosophy, which basically says things arise without cause. They are random. There's random arising without any particular cause. And that's very simply refuted by common day observation, that things do have very clear causes and conditions for their arising. And if we wouldn't believe that, we wouldn't act in the world accordingly. So it's clear that things do not arise without a cause. So in this way, the logical relationship between results arising from themselves, from something other, a cause that is other, from a combination or from both, is not tenable. It doesn't work. So that's why he then says there is no arising in any way, because there is no fifth possibility of arising. If we accept the arising of phenomena, it has to arise either from a phenomenon has to arise either from itself, from another, from both, or without a cause. No fifth possibility is conceivable. And then we can come back to Khyentse Wangpo. So that's where the ultimate, the word ultimately is so important, and it gives us the solution to that whole problem, because he explained that ultimately there is no arising. So if we regard the arising of phenomena from the conventional perspective, in other words, from the perspective of dependent arising, of course we speak of arising of phenomena, we speak of causes and results and conditions and all of that. But simply because they are dependent, that they are all contingent phenomena, no ultimate relationship, no real ultimately independent cause can be identified for the arising of any particular result on the ultimate level. And this is something that gives a lot of headache at the beginning, particularly at the beginning of the studies of Madhyamaka, is to always confuse these two levels of ultimate and conventional. And if we confuse them, then it's very difficult to make sense of all these arguments. So this is therefore the kindness of Khyentse Wangpo to remind us in all of these four arguments. He always says ultimately, ultimately, ultimately. So he gives us the answer. When you think of this arising, how do you approach it? Do you approach it from clinging to things as real, or oh no, that's how we should analyze them. I should say like this. We should analyze things from the point of view of their ultimate existence. The conventional, and this is where Madhyamaka then actually becomes even more complicated, is the understanding of conventional reality and the arising of phenomena on the conventional level, the working of karma and so on. This is where there are almost endless debates between the different schools of Madhyamaka, is the understanding of conventional reality and how all of that works. On the level of analysis of ultimate reality, there are of course important differences between various schools, but the very complicated details are found in the analysis of conventional reality. Okay, so I think I'll stop here. Let's see if there's any debates or questions.
May I also add one
Please.
useful tidbit to this? This particular presentation, I think, is also good to know. because ultimately it comes from the Tuktatse, the treasury of precious tenet systems. And when these reasonings are presented there, this all is in the Svatantrika context. So I think that's also, there's maybe some influence on the usage of ultimately, particularly. Yeah.
I just shared in the group chat a link for the text. Thank you, Jamie. That discusses the distinctions between the various schools, including I think Shentong and Dzogchen, Prasangika, and so on. So you can have a look there.
I think it's a lot of information to process. Maybe I can ask both of you to just say a few words how all this reasoning and contemplation actually inform your practice, and how do you feel on a day-to-day basis, like doing all this work, all this studies. Of course you use it in your work, right? But how does it affect your own practice as well?
I will let you go first, Christian.
My silence was inviting you to speak, actually. So I honestly, to be very honest, sometimes I feel like, unfortunately, I have to say, like there's the analogy which is so beautiful, a ladle in the soup. So because I'm incredibly fortunate to be able to work on these amazing texts and to be exposed to these teachings and the wisdom of these masters. But of course, there is a danger of staying on an intellectual level because it is such a intellectually time-consuming task. So I know very well that that doesn't cut it. If I really want to have some results in my practice, just staying on an intellectual understanding is not going to solve much of my emotional troubles, for sure. So that the analogies, I like it so much because it's this, the ladle that is immersed in the soup for hours and hours. So it's right there where all the nutrients are. But because it's a ladle, it doesn't consume them. It doesn't really help. Instead of using the ladle to actually eat and get nutrients from the soup, it's just sitting there, soaked in the soup of Madhyamaka, or soaked in the soup of these teachings, without getting really much ripening happening in my own mind. So that's let's say on the little bit more maybe realistic, but also a little bit pessimistic side of things. On the positive side of things, I would say that again, I want to explain this with an analogy. I think being exposed to Dharma, being exposed to teachings, whether in the work of translation or studying, reading, receiving teachings, continuously being bombarded by this wisdom, has definitely an effect. And I think so the analogy I like for that very much is when you go out in the mist, you will not notice how your clothes get wet slowly because it's very slow. So you go out, you don't feel much different. You maybe feel there's a little bit of humidity. Like when you go in the presence of a great teacher, you will feel there's something special, but you don't feel immediately changed after that, right? You maybe feel some kind of um, some juiciness or some blessing of some sort afterwards, but that kind of goes away after some time, right? But so similar in you may feel the humidity when you go out into the mist, but when you stay out for some time, eventually your clothes when you go home they will be really wet. So I think somehow that's the Dharma does that also, just by being exposed to it again and again. There is penetration of that into our various levels of being. At least that's my hope, because in terms of practice, I don't think I can say much. Yeah.
Thank you. It's a wonderful answer, actually. I love it a lot. Shey, do you have anything to add?
This very beautiful mist analogy is in the Zen mind, beginner's mind, right? Yeah.
I heard it from a Thai teacher.
Oh, really?
Mm.
Interesting.
Mm.
Oh yeah, I'm not sure what I can add to that beautiful statement. I was going to do a PhD on these reasonings, but then I gave it up and I just work for Khyentse Vision Project. So what? Yeah, I mean there are. I think they generally say there are three sort of ways. You know, there's the Chinapoi look, the sort of the way of transferring blessings, the Tosantawi look, the way of arriving at the view through listening and contemplation, and the Gompa Mengaki look, the tradition of meditating based on pith instructions. And of course, the transference of blessings tradition is, I think, like, you know, if you're Naropa and then Tilopa hits you with the shoe and his sandal, and then Naropa collapses into a faint and then wakes up with full realization. If you're like that, then you don't really need to worry so much, I think, about Madhyamaka reasoning. And then there's two other traditions, but these also don't necessarily have to be in conflict, and they can go together. But specifically, of course, studying the Madhyamaka reasoning would fall under the way of approaching the view through listening and reflection. Yeah. And of course, that has many benefits. Yeah. Otherwise, Nagarjuna would have been wasting his time. But yeah, nothing much more to add. Yeah.
Okay, so do we want to do the concluding prayers?
Sorry, I just see a question now.
Oh, okay.
I was confused Jack, I was confused how Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo refutes dependent arising ultimately, and where that is placed in the four arguments. So the dependent arising is the is one of the two subcategories of the last argument. Maybe do you? Oh no, you cannot share. 1 second. Here. So he says the argument of great dependent origination is twofold. Arranged as an argument of affirming negation, that's one. That's great dependent arising. And then arranged here, lower down below, arranged as an as an argument of non-affirming negation, neither singular nor multiple. So he divides that the argument of dependent arising, and I mean, for me, basically, but Shey, maybe you can speak to that. For me, the notion of dependent arising itself is the refutation of ultimate existence of any sort. Because things arise in dependence, there is no ultimate dependent arising, of course. That the very notion of ultimate is the opposite of dependent arising. And so the fact that things are arising in dependence proves their ultimate non-existence. Maybe Shey, you can shed light.
I think no need to add much to that, but yeah, just on the question of like, as you'll notice sometimes when these reasonings are arranged, you see ultimately sometimes you may not actually, and that's the reason for that. I think if you study the difference between Svatantrika and Prasangika, these two kind of main categories of Madhyamaka, then you can sort of get into the reasons as to why that is. Yeah, it'll be explained in detail. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, are we going to just point out we have the document?
Do you want to share? You have it in your drive, right?
Yes. Oh, can I just send you the link and then you could put it into the chat?
Oh, wait, yeah. Wait, I have it also. I'm gonna just share that.
Yeah, the link should give everyone access.
So that's, yeah. So here, Shey and I compiled a list of helpful resources. You have from the Khyentse Vision project, a few texts that relate to that subject. And then some teachings by modern masters, traditional commentaries, and also 2 online courses if you want to explore the teachings on Madhyamaka in more detail.
Yeah, so it's sort of depending on your level of sort of interest and time and so on and so forth. If you just want to read one of the books by the modern lineage masters, then you could do that. If you want to get into more detail, then there's lots of traditional commentaries, and particularly this Adornment of the Middle Way commentary by Mipam Rinpoche, that they call it sort of the eyes of Mipam Rinpoche, of Ju Mipam. And at the beginning, it has sort of like a framework for the text, which is very extensive and really covers Mipam Rinpoche's approach to Madhyamaka in detail. So actually just reading that framework at the beginning in translation, it would be really helpful for developing an understanding of Madhyamaka, particularly in the Nyingma tradition, but of course in general, yeah. Yes, and one should add that Mipam Rinpoche was asked to compose sort of guidance manuals for the Rangluk, in this case, I guess the Nyingma tradition, at the request of or command of Jamyang Khyentse Wangpo.
Right, and I guess don't worry if you didn't have time to save that particular link. We will send it out with the recording of the session. It will be published in the Khyentse Vision Project YouTube channel, as well as we'll send out a newsletter with all the information and links and the related materials. So if there are no other questions, I will invite you guys to lead us for the concluding prayers. Shey or Christian, do you want to recite that?
And by this merit, may all attain omniscience, may defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara, may all beings be free. As long as space remains, as long as the world remains, may I too remain, to alleviate the sufferings of the world.
Okay, well, thank you everyone who survived till the end of the second hour of our discussion. It was really, really great. Thank you, Shey and Christian as well. And please subscribe to our social media to be the first to know about our future Text of the Month event. And we'll see you very soon. We have some very exciting announcements for our May event. So please keep in touch with us. And now I will ask everyone to unmute to say bye and thank you to Shey and Christian. Okay.
Very much. It's really interesting.
Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
everyone.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you
Muchas
so much. It
gracias.
was really great.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for the wonderful
Thank you
sharing.
very much. Sí, sí.
Thank you very much.